you very much for joining us. I see we're just gone 1:30. We have, I think, probably a little over 50% of the folk that registered. So maybe we'll, if it's okay, we'll just give folk another minute or two and then we'll kick off.
So I'm Nick Brand. I'll run you through our perspective as IBM on IFRS 16. So first of all, I hope you're all familiar with what's coming. I think that's probably why you're on this webinar today. IFRS have recommended a new accounting standard that will come into effect on the 1st of January 2019. So we're a couple of months away from this coming into effect. It will remove a distinction between finance and operating leases, which will mean that if you're a business that's using financial leases today, you will need to report your financial position on those leases onto your yearly balance sheet. So it's a big change. What we see typically is there's not as much discipline around financial leases because we haven't had to put them on the balance sheet before. What we also see is, or what we expect is, it's going to affect some industries more than it will others. So for example, retailers are typically leasing their stores. Banks are typically leasing, financial institutions are typically leasing their branches, or they're leasing the space that their ATMs are on walls. Manufacturers are using leasing to cover the cost of expensive machinery. On a more broad scale, if you're a business that has company cars in operation, typically they're leased, they're not owned. So really, IFRS 16 is going to affect quite broadly across most businesses in Europe. Marta, next slide, please. Great. So how's it going to affect you in the short term? So as I mentioned earlier, because we haven't had to report this information on the balance sheet, it's been a less stringent process around reporting where we are on financial leases. Typically what we see is businesses, because financial leases are very complex with various pricing, countries, product ranges, when this grows into lots and lots of leases, it can become quite complex. So typically today we're expecting that businesses have moved to spreadsheets. It was a very easy, quick fix just to throw financial leases in spreadsheets and manage the problem there. However, what we see and what the industry sees, that spreadsheets typically have a 1% error rate within them, and therefore there is a risk in running your business off spreadsheets. And now that we have to move this data onto the balance sheet, we really need to remove all risk and make sure it's accurate. Specifically on IFRS 16, you will need to focus around the data collection, the validation and analysis of your leasing that you have out there today. So we'll need to collect the data, we'll need to classify it if it has an IFRS 16 connotation, analyze that and get that data ready to go onto the balance sheet. So it will require greater discipline than what you may be using today around your leasing. What this all boils back to is, we will need to have a reliable forecast and reliable data around the leases we have today. And that's where we really see the risk, is we can't introduce that to the balance sheet. Next slide, please. Okay, so how IBM have responded to this. So we've built a customized model that sits on top of our industry-leading financial planning solutions called Planning Analytics. We'll come to that in a second. But we're delivering a pre-packaged framework. It will help you from contract creation to expiration. So you will be able to pick contracts up manually or pull data in from other sources, and then classify that data ready for IFRS 16. So that's going to be very important. you'll be able to do multi-dimensional analysis and what-if scenario modeling. So if you are using spreadsheets today, this is going to be a big bonus that you can start to do that kind of work on top of your data. Again, all in preparation before moving on to the balance sheet. So we'll move on to next slide, please, Mate. But the technology that IBM offers in the market is planning analytics. Like I said, it's an industry-leading enterprise planning solution recognized by many of the analysts. Just so you know, we have over 7,000 customers globally using this technology, and we've helped over 30 customers in Europe over the last couple of months get ready for this new accounting practice. So we have experience in this space, and we're happy to help you on this journey. What we typically see today when we talk to customers is on the left-hand side here, you can see that they have a number of data sources in place today, so be it an ERP or a CRM or lots of other data sources. These can be integrated, sometimes they're not, and there's a lot of manual processes that the Office of Finance is having to do with this data in order to prepare a budget cycle. It could be that you're doing capital expense planning, those kind of scenarios. And typically, you may need to revert back to spreadsheets to do this. The problem with this is we see version control problems in spreadsheets, and you're introducing time delays by having to bring in extra resource to get ready to do a cycle. It could be that you've picked up data from another person, there's errors in that data, and then we move that data through our manual processes, which creates risk, in the numbers we're reporting. And all of this leads to we're producing inaccurate and unreliable forecasts. If you go to the next slide, what we're doing with planning analytics is we're very good at reading data. So we're very good at integrating to data sources you have or pulling data in from spreadsheets today. And we provide a platform that will ultimately will enhance productivity savings because we remove errors. It will increase forecast accuracy, driving your profitability and reducing risk in your financial planning processes. Okay, so that was a very quick tour of what we're doing around IFRS 16. We have prepared a demonstration, which I'll hand over to Mate now to take us through.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So first of all, let me introduce this guided demo. We are showing this guided demo because you are able to go through it by yourself. I will share the link after the call, and actually I can show you how it is working. So actually you could see every single step that I will take in the right hand side. You could see where to click, what you are doing right now, so you are able to go through it alone. You are able to share it and show it to your colleagues. And right now, as I mentioned, I will go through it. First of all, I have to mention this IFRS 16 Solution Accelerator is a fully customizable application. That means we could customize, of course, the dimensions like the legal entity. So we could use your legal entities, your profit center, cost centers in the application. But we also could customize the look and feel of the solution. So for example, if you don't like this, I would say, background from bricks, we could change this picture, of course. We could use your companies look and feel, your pictures, and so on and forth. First of all, I would like to show the global assumption, where you could see the standard parameters that the calculation is using and that can be used in this IFRS 16 model. First of all, let me explain the discount rates. We could define standard discount rates for each and every country, and for different type of or different lengths of lease contracts. So we have a different standard discount rate for Sweden for a 3-year lease contract, 5-year, and so on and forth. We could define the qualifying parameters for IFRS 16 as well. As you all know, there are two main parameters, which is the short-term limit. So I would say every contract under 12 months, where the length is under 12 months, the IFRS 16 rules doesn't apply it. And every asset which is under 5,000 euro, this is also not, I would say the IFRS 16 calculation is not running on these assets. So we could set these qualifying parameters for each and every country. We could use as an optional way, we could use indexes like we are using the real estate October indexes for premise leases. And of course, the model made you able to register your contracts and work with your contracts in different currencies. And in order to, I would say, consolidate these contracts, we are setting up the exchange rates, and then the application is automatically calculating the balance sheet and the P&L in different currencies and in one common currencies if it is required. Let's create a contract. We also could gather the contract from your existing data sources, but the model also prepared to register manually the contracts. First of all, we need to set the contract number. Right now, this red 120, the contract name, which will be for Volvo XC40. The lease category, we have to select it. We have to select the legal entity, and we could select the profit center, cost centers, and as I mentioned, it can be fully customized to your requirements, to answer your requirements. And we have additional dimension that you could use, for example, for a financial tag or functional tag. And then we could create the contract. The contract is created. The other IFRS 16 qualifiers is pre-filled. So, because in order to apply the IFRS 16 rules, the right of use of an identified asset, we have to have it. We have to all the economic benefits and the direct use of the asset as well. If something is set to here, then the IFRS 16 calculation won't be applied for this certain contract. If I'm going to the next slide, this is where we have to, I would say, set up the timing of the contract. So we could set the inception date, the commencement date, and the contract end date as well. We have other options to fill. For example, if this lease contract have an extension option, we could set it. We could say it, yes, it is a 1 year extension. We could add an extension comment. And as you could see, the effective end date is calculating based on these parameters that we are registering right now. We also could define the termination option, and we could define as well if this contract is an open-end contract or a fixed contract. And these, as I mentioned, these parameters have an effect to this effective end date. In the next one, we could set, I would say, the amounts, the other details of the contract, like the periodic payment. We could set if this payment is prepaid or not prepaid. We could set the frequency. We could set the currency. If we are using the company default, then it could be euro or any other currencies as well. If we are setting these parameters to no, then we have the, I would say, the rights to change the exact currency that we would like to use for this certain contract. We could apply discounts as well, and as you remember at the first screen in the global assumption, we predefined the standard discounts. But if you would like to use a non-standard discount for this certain contract, we could do this, set it no, and set the discount rate for this contract to 4%. And the next we have the IFRS 16 calculation. We are able to run it. We can define that, okay, this running process can go through all the legal entities that we have, or we could select only one legal entities where we would like to run this IFRS 16 calculation. For this demo, I will run the calculation for all the entities. And in order to double check the results that we have, I am drilling down to the cars. And as you could see, we have this red 120, the Volvo XC40 in the analysis. That means we run the IFRS 16 calculation and the calculation applied to the new contract that we just registered. On the next slide, we could analyze the details of this contract. We could see the, I would say, different data of the contract. First of all, I would say let's select the contract that we just registered. So this red 120. As you could see, we could check the liability, the lease payment, the monthly depreciation, and all the other details which is necessary to differentiate according to the IFRS 16 standard. We could check each and every month how, I would say, the financial conditions will look like over the lease contract. And from this calculation, we could, I would say, generate a booking table. That means we are able to export back the data that we calculated to your existing systems where you are, I would say, creating the your balance sheet or P&L in order to, I would say, have the IFRS 16 ready data. And let's pick the year and the specific quarter that we would like to see, and let's see the contract that we just created. So the red 120, and as you could see, we can check the booking details of the contract that we created from the debit and the credit side as well. After this, we could go to the contract assessment. But before that, I would like to mention we have here the currency dimension. So that means we are able to see these financial and booking details in a local currency and in a group currency as well. And as I mentioned, Planning Analytics and this IFRS 16 solution Accelerator is calculating these different currencies automatically based on the exchange rates that we could define in the global assumption sheet. So let's see the contract assessment, and let's select the contract that we just created, the red 120. As you could see, we are able to check the details of this contract in one screen. We are able to check the qualifiers that I already mentioned, the right of use of the asset, that we have the all economic benefits and the direct use of asset as well. And we also could check if this contract is a short-term contract and the asset is a low-value asset or not. And I would say these parameters are defining that this contract, in this contract, we have to apply the IFRS 16 calculation. This contract is still in the preliminary status. That means we are able to change the details of it, like the payment type, or prepaid or not prepaid, and everything else, until I would say, validate this contract. When we are validating this contract, as you could see, the status will be validated. That means we are not able to change the details of the contract, but we could modify it if we open a new version of this contract. So if I click to the modify, then I create a new version of the contract where I could adjust the contract details and validate it again. And of course, in this solution accelerator, we could terminate the contract, because in real life it could happen, and also we could delete a contract. And after this, let me see the contract overview, which is an additional analysis that the IFRS 16 solution accelerator is providing, where we could, I would say, select a certain period that we would like to check, for example 2019, and the contracts that we would like to see. I would like to check the car contracts. So actually this is again a different analysis where we could check the monthly payments, the present value, the contract depreciation. We could see the key statistics of the car contracts, and we have different, I would say, visualization in order to understand better our financial situation. Planning Analytics actually could work together with Excel, so we have a full live integration with Excel. We don't want to take Excel from the Office of Finance. We could export our data to Excel. I'm just exporting it, downloaded it. So actually this is a standalone Excel. We could analyze the data, we could use further the data if we would like, but we also could make a live connection between the planning analytics models like the IFRS 16 solution accelerator. So just connecting to the model. Of course, I have to log in because everything is secured and audit trailed in Planning Analytics. I could select one view that I would like to use here and just put into the Excel sheet, and I would say everything is live. So if I'm changing the data here, that means I'm changing the data in Planning Analytics. So it is really so the whole IFRS 16 solution accelerator can be used via the Excel. Actually, that was the guided demonstration. I would like to again highlight it that you are able to go through it by yourself. So every step is written in the left-hand side. We will share the link, and you could come back to us with questions or with the next steps. But of course, we would like to hear the questions right now if you have any.
Thank you very much, Mate. So that probably takes us through the agenda of what we were going to go today. Is there anybody who's on who'd like to ask any questions from either Mate or Nick? Okay, it sounds like Mate, can you just take everybody off mute? Or I think everybody is on mute, so if anybody wants to ask a question, they need to, yeah.
Yeah, so actually the line is open, so you could ask.
Okay. Has anybody any questions? It sounds like possibly.
Yeah, but it's I like the OTT and those numbers.
Okay, folks. Look, we will forward the recording of the demonstration and the information from today. We'll follow up with emails to everybody who participated, and if there's anybody who has any questions at all, feel free to contact ProStrategy. My contact details are on the screen at the moment, and we'll be delighted to respond to any questions directly. And just wanted to say thank you very much to Mate and Nick for joining us on today's webinar and helping us understand the IBM IFRS 16 Accelerator.